At some point in the last decade, someone in Sydney decided that $1 million was a reasonable amount of money to spend on a two-bedroom house with a bathroom that's had the same tiles since 1987. And then someone else agreed. And then somehow, incredibly, everyone agreed, and now here we are. New South Wales is an enormous state. It contains mountains, rainforests, and coastline that looks like it was designed to make people weep gently with gratitude. And yet the vast majority of its population is crammed into one corner of it, paying extraordinary money for the privilege of being stuck in traffic on the M1. There are towns in this state, beautiful towns with actual streets and actual communities, where your retirement money goes so far that you'll feel mildly guilty about it, where the median house price is less than half of Sydney's, where people know your name and the pace of life is something you control rather than something that controls you. Let's jump in. 1. Barrie. 2 hours south of Sydney on the south coast, sitting just far enough from the city to feel like a different world and just close enough that you haven't cut yourself off entirely. That balance is harder to find than you'd think, and Barrie has nailed it. This is a heritage town in the truest sense. The main street looks the way main streets were supposed to look before every town in the country started getting the same fast food chains and the same discount retailers. Sandstone buildings, wide footpaths, a butcher, a baker, a bookshop, independent cafes serving coffee made by someone who actually cares how it tastes, a monthly farmer's market where you can buy food grown by people who live 20 minutes away and have a real conversation about it. The landscape around Barrie is the Shoalhaven region, some of the most beautiful coastline in Australia, national parks, rolling green hills that stay green because the rainfall here is generous. You are never more than 15 minutes from a beach that could make you stop walking and just stand there for a while. Now, Barrie is not the cheapest option on this list, and the numbers make that clear. The median house price currently sits at around $1,650,000, which reflects just how much this town has been discovered. But here's the thing. Greater Sydney's median house price is $1,607,046 as of early 2026. What you're getting in Barrie at a comparable price point is not a Sydney suburb with Sydney problems. You're getting a heritage main street, world-class coastline, and a genuine community around you. If you're coming out of Sydney with solid equity, you can easily make the numbers work. 2. Mudgee. 3.5 hours west of Sydney in the Central West, Mudgee sits in a valley that looks like it was designed specifically to make people feel calm. Hills on every side, the Cudgegong River winding through, a sky that goes all the way to the edges at night in a way that city skies simply cannot. The town has a population of around 10,000, which is the sweet spot for retirement living. Big enough to have everything you need, small enough that it still feels like a community rather than a suburb. There's a proper main street with good restaurants, galleries, a cinema, the kind of place where Friday nights still means something. And then there are the wineries, over 40 of them in the region, producing wines that have been winning national and international awards for decades. Cool nights, warm days, volcanic soils, and the result is bottles that you'd pay a fortune for in a Sydney restaurant and can buy direct from the cellar door for a fraction of that. On the numbers, the median house price in Mudgee sits at around $720,000, less than half of Greater Sydney's median of over $1.6 million. For that money, you're getting a 4-bedroom home on a proper block with a yard, established gardens, and a shed. Not a 1-bedroom apartment with a car space that the agent described as cozy. The value is real, and it won't stay this accessible indefinitely. 3. Bowral. The Southern Highlands. 90 minutes from Sydney. A different altitude, a different climate, and a slightly different atmosphere to anywhere else on this list. Bowral is the kind of town that has always attracted people who've done well for themselves and decided at some point that doing well wasn't enough on its own, that lifestyle mattered, that beauty mattered, that sitting in a garden on an autumn morning with a proper coffee and a view of the mist lifting off the hills was worth more than another year of Sydney commuting. The autumn here is one of the genuine spectacles of New South Wales. The Southern Highlands in April and May, when the deciduous trees turn and the mornings get sharp and the whole landscape shifts into amber and red and gold. It is the kind of thing that reminds you that you chose the right country to live in. The town has excellent restaurants, proper boutiques, a strong arts presence, and the Bradman Museum. The infrastructure is good. The hospital at Bowral services the whole Southern Highlands region and is well regarded. On property, the median house price in Bowral currently sits at around $1,530,000, down about 7% year-on-year, which, if you're a buyer, is actually useful timing. The market has softened, vendors are realistic, and the lifestyle you're buying into hasn't changed one bit. If you're coming out of Sydney with solid equity, you're not stretching, you're landing. What you're getting isn't just a house in a pretty town. It's the Southern Highlands in autumn, a community that's been here for generations, and a pace of life that most people only ever visit on a long weekend. 4. Bega. Here's a town that doesn't get the attention it deserves, and I think that's exactly part of the appeal. Bega is in the far south coast of New South Wales, tucked into the valley of the Bega River, about 4.5 hours from Sydney. It is not a town that's trying to impress you. It is a town that has been quietly going about its business for a very long time, doing it well, and not particularly fussed about whether the rest of the state has noticed. It's a working town, a real one, the kind of town where the economy isn't built entirely around tourism, where actual industries exist, where people have lived for multiple generations and have no intention of leaving. When you move to a town like that, you're not arriving as a consumer, you're arriving as a potential member of the community. That's a different relationship, and it's a better one. The surrounding landscape is extraordinary. You're 20 minutes from the Sapphire Coast, Tathra, Merimbula, Bermagui, some of the least crowded and most beautiful beaches anywhere in Australia. The kind of beaches where you can walk for an hour and see 3 other people, and all 3 of them are locals doing the same thing. The median house price in Bega sits at around $620,000. Hold that against Greater Sydney's median of $1,607,046 and let it sink in. For less than 40% of the price of an average Sydney house, you are getting a real home on real land in a real community with some of the most pristine coastline in the country within easy reach. That's not a downgrade, that's a completely different value equation. 5. Bellingen. Half an hour inland from Coffs Harbour, tucked into the Bellingen Valley on the mid-north coast, Bellingen is a town that operates by slightly different rules to everywhere else. It always has, and the people who were drawn to it tend to be exactly the kind of people who are fine with that. The community here has been creative and independent-minded since the 1970s, and the character that emerged from that has been remarkably durable. There are artists, musicians, and craftspeople, a world-class jazz festival, a market on the 3rd Saturday of every month that has been running for decades and still feels alive, not like a tourist attraction, but like a genuine gathering of people who make things and want to share them. The landscape is lush and subtropical. Rainforest in the hills, the Bellingen River running through the middle of town, clear and deep and swimmable through the warmer months, mountains on the horizon, the kind of beauty you don't stop noticing just because you live there every day. The median house price in Bellingen sits at around $869,000, up a modest 3% over the past year, steady, not explosive. For a town with this landscape, this community, and this quality of life, that remains genuine value compared to what the same money gets you anywhere near a major city. It's not cheap, and it never pretended to be, but the numbers still firmly favor the move. 6. Goulburn. 2 hours southwest of Sydney, sitting on the southern tablelands at just over 800 meters above sea level, Goulburn is the kind of town that serious people looking for serious value keep coming back to. It's one of Australia's oldest inland cities, and it carries that history in a way that feels lived in, rather than preserved. The streetscapes have genuine character, Victorian and Edwardian architecture on a scale that's rare outside the capital cities. There's a cathedral. There are parks that have been there for over 100 years. There is a sense of permanence here that newer towns simply cannot manufacture. What Goulburn offers that almost nothing else on this list can match is infrastructure at a price point that still feels like a genuine opportunity. The town has a well-regarded hospital, a strong network of GPs and specialists, good retail, excellent road and rail connections to both Sydney and Canberra. If you have family in either city, Goulburn puts you within striking distance of both. That's a genuinely useful position to be in. The median house price in Goulburn as at the end of 2025 was $640,631, and house values have grown nearly 54% over 5 years, meaning the town has real momentum behind it. At less than 40% of Sydney's median and sitting between 2 major cities with all the infrastructure that implies, Goulburn represents the kind of value that won't stay overlooked for much longer. 7. Thirroul. Most people driving down the Prince's Highway through the Illawarra glance at the sea and keep going. The ones who stop at Thirroul tend to start looking at real estate within the week. Thirroul sits on the coast about 1 hour south of Sydney, just north of Wollongong, in a strip of coastal villages that collectively represent one of the most underrated places to live in New South Wales. What makes Thirroul different to its neighbors is character. It has always attracted artists and writers. D.H. Lawrence famously lived here for a period and wrote about the landscape, and that gravitational pull towards creative, thoughtful people never really left. The beach is extraordinary, not famous in the way Bondi is famous, which is precisely the point. It's a long, north-facing stretch of sand with a rock pool, backed by the escarpment that rises sharply behind the town. You get the coast and the mountains simultaneously within about 500 meters of each other. The train line runs directly to Sydney, which means getting to the city when you need to requires no car, no parking, no stress. You simply get on the train. The median house price in Thirroul currently sits at around $1,725,000. Premium coastal property, no question. This is a town for those coming out of Sydney with strong equity who want to stay connected to the coast and the city without actually living in either. For that buyer, Thirroul is one of the finest trades you can make. 8. Dorrigo. High on the escarpment above the Bellingen Valley, about 1 hour inland from Coffs Harbour, Dorrigo sits at over 1,000 meters above sea level and looks out over one of the most magnificent landscapes in New South Wales. The town itself is small and unhurried, with a main street that operates at the pace it wants to and a community that has settled into its rhythms over a long time. There's a good pub, a cafe or two, local shops, a sense that people here have made a choice to live simply and well and are not interested in being talked out of it. But what sets Dorrigo apart is what surrounds it. The Dorrigo National Park is a World Heritage-listed rainforest, ancient, extraordinary, one of the best preserved subtropical rainforests in Australia. The skywalk at the Rainforest Centre puts you out over the canopy with views across the valley that are genuinely hard to describe to someone who hasn't stood there. This is not a tourist attraction you visit once. This is something you walk into regularly, something that becomes part of your daily life. The median house price in Dorrigo currently sits at around $635,000, up 7.6% over the past year. For a town perched above a World Heritage rainforest with a pace of life this unhurried and a landscape this magnificent, that price is still accessible by any reasonable measure. The cost of living here is low. And what you're buying access to, the escarpment, the forest, the view, the quiet, is the kind of thing that has no real equivalent anywhere near a city at any price. Nobody lies on their deathbed wishing they'd stayed in big cities longer. Nobody looks back and thinks, I should have done a few more years of peak hour traffic. What people regret is waiting for the right time, the right moment, the right sign that it was finally okay to go and actually live the life they'd been funding for 40 decades. You've already paid for your freedom. The only question left is whether you'll use it. You've done the hard part. Go do the good part. Thank you for watching.